I felt like when Mark asked me to speak on April Fool's Day, I felt like, oh, I can't not speak about foolishness. There's no way not to do that. Even though I haven't done anything. I haven't done a prank on April Fool's Day in quite a while. But one more, I gotta bring this up here. Okay, so it's the paradox of life is that the more you learn, the more you realize how little you know, and the older I get, the more true that becomes. I remember when I was a teenager, and I would look at my little brothers, and I would go like, "Oh, I know so much more than them." And then eventually, I got into college, and I looked back on my teen years, and I thought, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know anything." And I know so much more now. I'm not a dumb teenager. And then I got to my 30s, and I realized I really thought I knew what was going on in my 20s, but I really didn't. And now I look forward in time, and I think, how much do I think I know now? That I'm going to find out in 10 years was probably stupid. So, wisdom is a very expensive and painful thing to get. And the cheapest way to gain wisdom is to learn from the mistakes and the folly of others. And if you read 1 Corinthians 10, it describes the children of Israel, and it says that's 1 Corinthians 10. Moreover, brethren, I would not that ye should be ignorant how that all our fathers were under the cloud and all passed through the sea, and were all baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and did all eat the same spiritual meat, and did all drink the same spiritual drink, for they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. But many of them God was not well pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. Now these things were our examples, to the intent that we should not lust after evil things as they also lusted. Because they got out of Egypt, and then they wanted to go back to Egypt. They thought, oh, everything was easier when, because that's like the trade-off of being a slave. You can really be three things in life. You can be a slave, you can be a tyrant, or you can negotiate and stick up for yourself and have rights. But that's the trade-off of being a slave, is you don't have to take any responsibility for your life. Someone else can control you. You ever wonder, like, how do people stay in, abusive relationships where the person controls everything that they do? The trade-off is that you don't have to do anything, and you can blame everything on somebody else. But anyway, so they wanted to go back into Egypt, and in verse 7, neither be ye idolaters, as some of them, as it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. They all made the golden calf. Neither let us commit fornication, as some of them committed and fell in one day, 23,000. Neither let us tempt Christ, as some of them also tempted and were destroyed of serpents. Neither murmur ye. It's funny that story, if you think about that story, bread was coming out of the sky. They were being fed by miracle bread from the sky, and they were complaining about it. They were like, oh man, back in Egypt, we had cucumbers, and we had fish, and we had this. We're tired of this bread, because maybe the first couple of times it fell down, they were really, whoa, this is cool. And then it's like, oh, the same thing again, miracle bread from the sky. Neither murmur ye, as some of them also murmured and were destroyed of the destroyer. Now all these things happened unto them for examples, and they are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. Wherefore let him that think he standeth take heed lest he fall. Thinking that you got everything figured out is the most dangerous place to be. It reminds me of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Have you ever heard about this? The Dunning-Kruger effect, they took a group of students and they gave them a math test, and then they gave them their score. They said, here's the score you got. Where do you think you are in the class? Do you think you're in the bottom half or the top half or the bottom quarter, the top quarter? And the students who did the worst were the worst at overestimating where they were. So they might be in the bottom half, and they're like, I think that test was hard. I think it was hard for everyone. So it turns out the less you know, the more you think you know, which is wild. That but yeah, so that's a dangerous place to be, and when when you don't know something, you don't know that you don't know it, and you tend to overestimate. It's like when I bought my house. I bought it in June of 2014, and I'd never remodeled the floor before. I thought, oh, I'll be able to do this, and we'll move in a couple months. And all of you know, it started to become like a story. I started hearing rumors being passed through the church. I don't think Bill's ever going to finish that house. It was October. It was Halloween was when I finished the floors and we moved in. So when you don't know how to do something, your idea about how long it takes is going to be completely off, and it's, you just don't know. So, but anyway, so the examples are given in the Bible for us to not do them, and it's also something that's like a testament to the truth of the Bible. I always think it's funny when people bring up the accusation, oh, the Bible was written to control people. It's like, well, who would do that? Oh, well, the ruling class, they want to control people and keep them under their thumb. And it's like, well, why did all the stories include the most embarrassing possible stories about the leaders? If the leaders were trying to control people, like that doesn't, something, if the Bible were man-made and they were trying to trick people, it's like you think they would present themselves in the best possible light. But like if you read the Bible cover to cover, it's like embarrassing, horrifying story after horrifying story of people's foolishness and big leaders, Abraham's folly and Jacob's folly right. There's so many stories like that. So, but anyway, so some of us, so the best way to learn is that we learn from the foolishness of other people. But some of us need to gain wisdom ourselves. There's a song that I really like by the Avett Brothers. It's called "Backwards with Time," and there's a line from it. That says, I was young and love was fun. Now it's so serious. Now all the fun has equal pain. There's something wrong with this. For all I know, there's more I don't. Oh, the little I have learned. For every year of knowledge gained is a negative year I've earned. And so and this is the other thing too, is that, I work with retirees. So I'm sitting with people in their 60s and 70s and 80s all the time. And turns out you still keep making mistakes even when you're older. You're still making choices that weren't all that smart, and you're like, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that. And hopefully you progress, but yeah, so to define foolishness from the Bible's perspective, foolishness is the unwillingness to listen and accept truth. So it says in Romans 1, if you go there. A lot of this text is familiar to a lot of you. It says, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness. And this idea of the wrath of God, it's funny. I was talking with somebody about this the other day. A lot of us think like, oh, the wrath of God is like God punishing us. And a lot of times God doesn't even need to punish us. If you lie to a bunch of people, they don't trust you anymore. Is that God being wrathful to you and, oh, I'm going to punish you? It's like, no, now people should not believe you because you're a liar. You've lied too many times, and now your story, and I've told my boys that. I said, I want to be able to go to bat for you, and if something happens and it's your word against somebody else's, I want to know that you're going to tell me the truth. So, or if we steal from someone, they're not going to like that. They're going to be upset. If you accidentally or willfully kill someone, their family is going to want vengeance on you. It's like the Bible talks about that thing, if you crank a nose, you're going to get blood out of it. That's the wrath of God, is we feel the consequences of our actions. In verse 19, because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has showed it unto them. Verse 20, for the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like unto corruptible man, and to birds and four-footed beasts and creeping things. So they turned God into like, oh, he's just an idol, just like everything else. So it's like the more you proclaim how wise you are, the more foolish you are being. And the proof of God's creation is wrapped up in everything, and the things that you need to do to believe that that all these things kind of came about, through a slow process of randomness over millions of years. It takes a lot of faith. So it seems to be a common thread that a lot of these instances of foolishness in the Bible involve the rejecting of wisdom, the rejecting of truth, and the majesty of the Creator God. Like Pharaoh, the fool says, "Who is the Lord that I should obey him?" That's at the heart of that. So there's a kind of rejection of truth, rejection of God's majesty, rejection of God as a creator that leads to foolishness. But then there's also a way to look at foolishness as aimlessness. If you think about the word sin, it means to miss the mark. And you will miss the mark all the time if you're aimless, if you don't have an aim. There's a story in Proverbs chapter 7 that talks about a young fool. And it's like a mother talking to her son. She says, "My son," if you go to Proverbs 7, "keep my words and lay up my commandments with thee." Verse 2, "Keep my commandments and live, and my law is the apple of thine eye. Bind them upon thy fingers, write them upon the table of thine heart. Say unto wisdom, thou art my sister, and call understanding thy kinswoman, that they may keep thee from the strange woman, from the stranger which flattereth with her words. For at the window of my house I looked through my casement," or my window, "and beheld among the simple ones," there's a bunch of stupid people hanging outside the window, "I discerned among the youths a young man void of understanding, passing through the street near her corner, and went the way to her house in the twilight and the evening, in the black and dark night. And behold, there met him a woman with the attire of an harlot and subtle of heart. She is loud and stubborn, her feet abide not in her house. Now is she without, now in the streets, and lieth in wait at every corner. So she caught him, kissed him, and with an impudent face said unto him, I have peace offerings with me. This day I have paid my vows. Therefore I came forth to meet thee, diligently to seek thy face. And I have found thee. I have decked my bed with coverings of tapestry, and with carved works, and with fine linen of Egypt. I have perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Come, let us take our fill of love until the morning. Let us solace ourselves with loves. For the good man is not home, is not at home. And he's gone on a long journey. He's taken a bag of money with him, and will come home at the day appointed. With her much fair speech she caused him to yield, and with the flattering of her lips she forced him. He goeth after her straightway, as an ox goeth to the slaughter, or as a fool to the correction of the stocks, till a dart strike through his liver, as a bird hasteth to the snare, and knoweth not that it is for his life. Hearken unto me now, therefore, O ye children, and attend to the words of my mouth. Let not thine heart decline to her ways, go not astray in her path, for she hath cast down many wounded, yea, many strong men have been slain by her. Her house is the way to hell, going down to the chambers of death. So, it's a very dark story in the book of Proverbs. But I think one of the problems with us, and we have the same problem that the disciples have, is we're too literal. So we read a passage like this and we think, boy, I'm not glad like one of those people who go to the street corner for company, or this is just like that no good ex-husband of mine. ... And it's also funny that women always complain about, oh, why is a woman always depicted this way? It's like, well, remember the man is depicted as the idiot in that story. So hopefully that balances out. But this is a little too literal. Like, what if your problem is snacking, and eating too much candy or eating too many sweets? Are there not advertisements for bad food on every street corner? Don't snacks beckon us? Don't bad habits like that beckon to us? Don't they tell us that our husband is a long ways off and he's on a long journey? Well, I have time to get my life together before Jesus comes. That's the foolish thing you tell yourself, because it's foolish because you don't know how much time you have. You really don't. Like I work in insurance, and it's amazing how many people say, well, I'm not dying anytime soon. Like, I hear that so many times. It's like, how do you know when you will die? Nobody knows that. But people, it's going to be a long time, and you meet people who don't even have a will. They don't even have their affairs in order. Speaking of which, if you're a church member, you can call trust services and you can get a will written. So that there's really no excuse for anybody that's a member of this church to not have their affairs in order. Sometimes I think it's just we don't want to think about it. We just want it because it's unpleasant to think that we might die. But if you are aware of the fact that you're going to die, you will treat life more valuably. If you know that none of us are making it out of this thing alive. We're not making it out of there. I think about this like with myself, like, I started gaining weight and I need to lose some weight because my old pants don't fit me. And so I started exercising every day. I ran a mile at least every day, and I stopped eating sweets, and I stopped doing all that, and then I lost 5 pounds, and I was like, oh, I didn't realize it would be that easy. I'll do it later. I'll work on getting things in shape later. It's like, why do we do this to ourselves? Why do we put off the things? Because it's funny too. It doesn't get easier later. It doesn't. It's like the worst thing that happened to me in college. I stayed up all night on writing a paper, and then I got an A, and the professor told me this is one of the best papers I've read in a long time. It was one of the worst things that the professor could have ever told me, because then I did that with every future paper. I just said, well, I like having fun with my friends, but I also got to make sure this teacher's happy. Okay, I'll just stay up all night and do it. And it got a lot harder as I got older and I was in grad school. It's like, oh, I'm not a spring chicken anymore. You can't stay up that late and live without being cranky and miserable the next day. So it's interesting. If you read the story, the young fool has no clear goal and does a lot of wandering and shuffling around in an aimless manner. So it's like that's like the definition of sin. Sin in the New Testament is a Greek word, hamartia. Did you know that the word, it was hamartia? It's kind of funny. He hamartia. He hamartiaed. It just doesn't, sin has a little bit more meaning, but it has a meaning of that you don't have any share of something due to missing the mark. There's sometimes you messed up, and because you messed up, you don't get any part of it. You completely miss out. You don't have any ownership now because you were too late or you didn't do something on time. And so the opposite of sin is hitting the mark. Well, you don't hit the mark without aiming for something. So one of the ways, the Bible talks about it not being a fool. The Bible doesn't even talk about that. There's only two fools in the Bible. There's the fool that rejects God, and there's a fool who's a fool for Christ. Like we talked about the last time I was here, God redeems the time. The solution, it seems, is to take up your cross, follow Jesus, and this means in many ways becoming a fool. Like the children's story I told the kids, the person who doesn't go along with the crowd looks weird. And God actually has a long history of telling people to do things that are foolish. Abraham killed his only son. Isaiah, was told to wander naked and barefoot for 3 years. Hosea was told to marry a harlot to symbolize the harlotry of God's people. In Matthew 17, we don't think about this as like a story of foolishness, but Jesus tells Peter, go find a fish, and then if you open its mouth, you'll find coins in its mouth. Think of Peter. He's fishing. He's like, I guess, pulls up the fish, and then he had to look in it. Think of how foolish that. Did he do it in front of anybody, or was he like, I don't want anybody to see me do this because it looks really stupid. So I'm just gonna go behind this tree here. And maybe there's nothing in there. Like, Jesus has been right in the past, but oh my goodness, and he had to actually do it and open the mouth, and he's like, well, there it is. So, but it's a very foolish idea, and it's funny how Jesus was like, I get the sense that he's like frustrated with the Pharisees. Are you going to pay the temple tax? Oh, you're going to do. Are you going to do this? And then he's like, you know what? I'm going to pay this in the most stupendously crazy way, and I'm going to pay it. It almost like showed Peter that Jesus was who he said he was. But Paul talks about us that we must aim for being fools for Christ, and that's what the scripture reading was about. And it says that the preaching of the cross is to them that perish foolishness, but unto us which are saved, it is the power of God. If you think about the story, Jesus said, if I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto me. That's a reference to that story in the desert where, they were complaining against Moses, and they were complaining against God, and they were complaining. So God sent poisonous serpents, and then Moses is instructed by God to make a golden serpent or bronze or something. I can't remember. It was a metal serpent, puts it up on top of a pole, and like lifts it up in the air, and he says, if you want to be saved, you have to look at it. It's a weird story. It's really weird. But when you think about it, you have to look at the problems that are killing you and face them. And that's what Jesus teaches us to do. You have to look at your problems. Your problems will not go away and automatically. You're going to have to face them. And that's the kind of thing that, Jesus up on the cross represents, that we're all going to die, and that this life is temporary. And if we don't face that, we're going to continue being fools. So, and it's like that. It's such a strange story, but then it destroys the wisdom of the wise, and it brings to nothing the understanding of the prudent. Where is the wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the disputer of this world? Hath not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For after that, in the wisdom of God, the world by wisdom knew not God. It pleased God by the foolishness of preaching to save them that believe. If you think about that, it's like just by talking to people, you could save their lives. So it does not sound super powerful. It sounds kind of foolish, but that's what we're called to do. But it says here that the Jews require a sign and the Greeks seek after wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified, under the Jews a stumbling block, and under the Greeks foolishness. But unto them which are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God. Because the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. And it's funny too, God has chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. And God has chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty. Like you think about how the printing press exploded the message of God. And, William Tyndale, one of the first writers of the translation of the Bible into English. And you just think about this guy just saving up money and printing Bibles. And then there was that Bishop of Durham who bought up a bunch of his Bibles and then burned them. And then he's like, oh, well, I'm going to charge a little, I'm going to make a profit, and then I'm going to use that profit to make more. And so he's just making more and more and more. And they burned him at the stake. And I remember reading that they asked him, who's your biggest financial supporter? And he said, well, the Bishop of Durham actually was my biggest client. He was always buying Bibles up from me and, using that for his operation. But it's kind of an amazing thing. Just that one guy, and all the amazing things that he was able to do by translating the Bible into English. And what a thing that God must have put on his heart to do that. That's a big thing. And I was listening to some people describe the King James, because the King James Bible, he commissioned a team of translators and said, okay, translate all this. And there's a lot of evidence that they looked at like William Tyndale's version. They're like, that's already translated pretty good. So there's a lot of passages that are almost as exact same as the way that William Tyndale did it. So it's a remarkable story, that man, but also how foolish. From the outside, it looks foolish. You're going to get burned alive for what you're doing. And he continued. He did not let the crowd cow him into fear of not doing what he knew that he had to do. So, I remember when I was a young person, I wanted to be a writer, and my teacher told me, I was 16 at the time, oh, you won't be a writer. So, well, why? Oh, well, life will get in the way, and you won't have time, and you'll just get busy. You'll have time with kids and family and all that kind of stuff. It just won't happen. I wanted to be a writer, too, when I was your age. Yeah, think about that. It's like I was 16, and, did that ever happen with you? Somebody just completely crushed your dreams and just rain on your parade, and they just told you, no, you're not going to be able to do that. That's just too much. That's too much. So what should I do is what I asked her. Well, get a more stable, predictable job like teaching. That's what I did. And it's tough because in some ways she was right, and in other ways it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because it's like, yeah, that job is more stable and predictable, but then it's also not what I wanted to do. So I didn't do it because I didn't make it a priority. I didn't aim at the thing that the Lord had put on my heart to do. And when I aimed at safety. And that's the same thing that goes on. This is, again, when I talk to some people, they look at the story of the children of Israel and they go, oh, well, they're so foolish. It's so foolish that the children of Israel would do that. I mean, there were miracles. There were this, there was that. Why would they want to go back to the old way? Huh? Yeah, exactly. Fish and leeks and garlic. They wanted to go back for fish and leeks and garlic. And but we're not different than them. We're not different than them. I had a dream, I had a vision, I had something I wanted to pursue since I was 12 years old, and then they were like, "Well, you need to go do a safe, predictable thing. Go back and do a safe, predictable thing." And then so then I spent 10 years in the desert at the university. So, but it just, but anyway, so yeah, and she was pretty smug about it, and again, I'm a kid. She had a lot of authority. And who was I? I was 16. I didn't know anything. I didn't want to be a fool. I thought, oh well, my teacher knows more than me. I'm just a lowly 16-year-old. Well, what do I know? And oddly enough, I decided, I was like, man, I'm going to write this book. I'm going to just get it done. And my supervisor at the time was like, no, you should just like work on getting your licensing for financial advising. Do this and this and this, and then you will have time to write your book later in life. And I thought, man, I'm not getting any younger, and I wanted to do this since I was 12 years old. And it's funny, I did it during the most busiest time of the year, and I happened to have the most appointments of any time in the year. It was very bizarre. So it's almost like when we aim at something that's meaningful, when we take up our cross and we bear it, we're kind of like partnering with Christ, and we become bigger. We become bigger when we're doing that, because when we're hiding, we're shrinking, we're pulling back. Oh, well, I think I'm just going to do the safe thing. And yeah, there's this thing that God's put in my heart that I should really be doing, but no, I think I'm just going to do the safe route. I'm sure that a lot of the angels surrounding Jesus were like, before he left and became a man, they were like, Jesus, this is a bad idea. Like, this does not make any sense. Why would you go down there? Well, Jesus wants to teach them what love is. He wants to show them what it means to love someone and sacrifice for them, and show someone that they're important enough to do that, even to the point where you might die in the process. There's probably plenty of angels who were like, just let it burn. Let it burn. It would be just and merciful. And then we start over with a new project, and hopefully this doesn't happen again. But the problem with doing something different and aiming at something is that you have a focus, and you become a different kind of fool. I remember it's funny, I remember my sister saying something when I started a sales job. She said, why don't you get a real job? A lot of people say that about salesmen, which was really funny. Because if you look around this room and you go home and you sit in your car, you look around your house, every single thing that you look at had to be sold by someone. That's right. Someone had to sell it. Like I remember, contrary to popular belief, great ideas and great products don't sell themselves. I was talking with Daria's grandma once. She's in her 80s, and some of you might remember these times and stuff. She was talking about her family was like the first one in the neighborhood to get an indoor toilet. Okay, and every one of their neighbors were like, "Why would you want a toilet inside your house? What a weird idea." I mean, don't you want to go 20 yards out to the outhouse and sit on a cold toilet in the winter, or have your bedpans and or your chamber pots or whatever, and like dump them out during the wintertime? You want to put all that inside your house? And it took a while, and now it's like no one. I met one person in my life who still has an outhouse. It's very rare. It's very, very rare. It makes me think about when I was in high school. There was one person who had a cell phone. His name was Corey Barnes, and I remember we all made fun of him. And he said, well, I'm a volunteer firefighter. I need people to be able to reach me at any time. And we just laughed at him. We were like, who does he think he is? Dr. Corey Barnes. We call him Dr. Corey Barnes. He needs people to reach him wherever he goes. He's so important. He needs to have a cell phone. We just thought it was the dumbest idea ever. And now cell phones are everywhere. They're ubiquitous. Like, there are 9-year-olds who have cell phones. And they're smartphones. And now there's even more. The technology has kind of exploded. But there was someone who started doing that, and it was a very foolish idea at the time, but someone caught it. And I remember I had a roommate in college. His name was Scott George, really smart guy. He was in the honors program, and he had a Centralis scholarship, and so he was very driven academically and was always working really hard, diligently every day. He had this book. It was the class that he took called Great Books, and it was an anthology like that big. And he carried it with him everywhere. Whenever he would go to lunch, he'd be reading out of that book. Whenever he went to dinner, he'd have that book. And whenever he went to breakfast, he'd have this giant book with him. It was huge. It was like that big and it was heavy, and we called it his girlfriend. We're like, oh, you got your girlfriend with you at lunchtime? Oh, you got your girlfriend again? He's like, yeah, she's not been treating me well today, making me do a lot. And we made fun of him, but he was really a great student. He did super well. Now he's working for the Special Olympics down in, I think, D.C. Really great guy too. So we made fun of him for it, and then it was funny. In college, he got a real girlfriend, and then he started texting with her, and nobody texted. It was like the first time. That was back when they charged you 10 cents per text, or 3 cents a text or something, and that adds up if you think about it. It's like whoever had that idea, they were like, man, this is a steal. We're making money hand over fist over these text messages. But we were all just making fun of him. And then fast forward 4 more years, I'm living in Korea, a country that it was the first country in the world that had the highest per capita of texting. And it just, there I am texting. I'm like, wow, this is really convenient. And then now we're all doing it. So I ate my crow with kimchi. So the question I'm going to close with is, are you willing to be a fool for Christ? And are we willing to look weird and funny? Are we willing to aim at something? Because a lot of times when we're unhappy in life, it's because we're not aiming at anything. You're not aiming at anything. You can't make forward progress. You can't make forward progress. You're going to feel stuck. You're going to feel miserable. And you're going to think about all the things that make you miserable. So I pray that we have the attitude of Paul in Romans 1:15 and 16. He says, so as much as is in me, I am ready to preach the gospel to you that are at Rome also. In verse 16, for I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. So God has put something on your heart. He's given you a cross to bear, and you have your own unique way of blessing the people around you. I really believe that. There are people, and I see it in sales all the time. There's people that yell at me and hang up on me, and I just mark them not interested, and then another person gets that lead and they call them and book with them. And then there's also ones that I call and then they book with me. And the person's like, man, they were really mean to me. Why were they nice to you? Even the one person, there's a guy that I'm training at my job, and it's funny, the lady was like, why would you call me? I'm in the grocery store line. You should not be calling me around. And she just yells at him and hangs up on him. And then 4 days later, he accidentally dialed her number again, and he looked in the notes. He's like, oh, no. And then she answers, and then he booked with her. And, so sometimes circumstances just change. But, you all have, there's something unique about all of you that God has put on your heart to bless the people around you. And there's something real big that you could aim at, like really big. And I want to encourage you to aim at that. And just in the same way I'm aiming at my things, and it's really tough. It's very discouraging at times, and sometimes you do feel like, man, is this just foolish? Is this a foolish idea? But I encourage you to take up your cross, follow Christ's example, and I hope that we can all do that and grow as people. If you could bow your heads with me as I close. Father in heaven, I thank you so much for giving us the gift of life, and I pray that you would inspire all of us to go home, to think about the things that you've laid on our hearts, even the things that we feel are out of our reach or out of our league, something that we're not capable of or that we couldn't do. And I pray that you'd help us to partner with you, that we'd believe in your ability to teach us and to guide us and to open opportunities for us to bless others and to make the world a better place, and to make the lives of the people around us better. And I just pray that you would do that, and that we would not listen to the weak and beggarly voice inside of us that says, you should not do anything like that, and that we can't do it. I just pray that you would just inspire us, Lord, with your Holy Spirit. And I pray these things in the name of Jesus. For his is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen.